And welcome back to I Know Fact All About That. This is episode 4. Episode 1, we journeyed into space. Episode 2, we journeyed into the mind. Episode 3, we relatively looked at time. And episode 4, we are looking at the interesting world of fungus. Is everybody ready for this one? Okay, if you've joined us before, you know the drill. If you're new here, there's 4 hosts, 5 facts. Everybody has a fact that's a lie. We ferret that out at the end. If you hear this noise,
fact off.
That means 2 people have the same fact and something special happens. Okay, so joining me today are Brown Roll Brie.
Thanks.
Nick, the naval wax cap. Oh.
I don't know about that.
And Shaggy Mane Sophie.
Oh. Hello.
If you haven't guessed it, they're all types of mushrooms. I'm a fungi. I wonder if there'll be mushroom for puns in this episode.
Oh, God.
That's what it's going to be like. There is a fun gal to my right who's called Brie, and she's going to start off with fact 1.
Okay. I thought I'd start at the most basic level because I struggled to get my head around what are we talking about. So fact number 1 for me, what actually is it? So in biology, all living things are broken down into 8 classifications, starting with, at the most basic level, your species, then genus, family, order, class, phylum, kingdom, and then domain. So there's 3 different domains. Fungus is a member of the eukaryotic domain, and eukaryotes are organisms whose cell contain a nucleus. Then within that domain of eukaryota, it's split into 8 kingdoms. Now this includes fungus, animals, plants, and 5 others, which I can't name. Of those kingdoms, the fungi kingdom is the most populous in the world. Now, we don't know how many fungus species there are. This is only an estimate, but it's estimated between 2.2 million and 3.8 million different species of fungus. So far, we've only described less than 150,000.
Wow.
Of those we have described, there's only roughly 300 species that are pathogenic to humans. So when we think about fungi, mushrooms, all that, we think, oh, they're all toxic. But there's relatively few that are dangerous that we know so far.
Oh, so if you would discover a fungus, you get to name it. Like if you discover an animal, you get to give it a name.
I think that's generally the case now, like similar to space. If you discover a new star or something, you get to choose its name. Well, what would you name it?
Well, I've been wearing one in my belly button.
Oh, God. And what would that be called?
Sophie.
Oh, thank you.
Sophie fungus.
Fun side fact, in taxonomy, it's poor form to name something after yourself.
I see.
In your honour.
So you could name it.
I would name it Sophie.
Yeah, so Kieran could name his belly button fungus Sophie I.
Sophie Holius.
Please don't.
And fact number 1 for Nick.
In Australia, we have a group of ants that are fungus-loving ants. The fungus Myrmecridium betae is a type of fungus that is farmed by ants. So ants of the bull ant and jumping jack families. So these fungus farming ants will collect the spores of the fungus and carry it back to their nest. So they cultivate the fungus by feeding it organic material and creating the perfect environment that provides the right amount of moisture, humidity, and temperature. And in return, the ants are rewarded with a food resource. So it's this really interesting symbiotic relationship between the ants and the fungus, where the ants protect the fungus and help it to grow and generate. And in turn, the ants have a reliable and readily available food source.
Well, that's taking the term ant farm and really expanding on it.
Wait, so they're feeding off the fungus, but they're allowing the fungus to grow?
Yeah, so the fungus produces something called gongolidia, and that is essentially the food source for the ants. There's actually other examples around the world where this happens. So leafcutter ants in Central and Southern America.
I read about that, yeah.
So the leafcutter ants will cut leaves, and in the forest you can see these trails of ants carrying a little clipped piece of leaf where they carry it off to their ant nest, and they feed the fungus the leaf, which in turn produces this food source for the ants.
And I read with the
So
leafcutter
smart.
ants that the fungus itself sets off a chemical compound or a pheromone, for lack of a better term, to tell the ants what variety of leaves they want, because I think it changes its appetite, I think. But I read somewhere that, or maybe it's depending on the fungus, the species of fungus, it has a particular flavour for ants. So the ants go out and find that particular
That's
species
super
of tree.
interesting. So to finish that off, this demonstrates just how intricate some of these interrelationships and symbiotic relationships are with animals and fungi, and it's super fascinating.
Very
It's really,
interesting.
really, really cool.
Very cool.
Okay, fact 1. Sophie, don't mess it up. It's your first time.
Make no promises. So my first fact is actually really similar to yours, Nick, except it doesn't work out so well for the ants in the end. So there's this fungus called, I'm going to read it because I can't pronounce it, Ophiocordyceps unilateralis, and it's otherwise known as the zombie ant fungus, and it's pathogenic to insects. So basically what this fungus does is it infects the brain of the ant, and it tells the ant that it needs to, so it goes inside the ant's brain, and then it tells the ant, okay, you need to leave your nest in the canopy and move down to the forest floor where it's nice and moist for the fungus to grow. So the ant does that, and it moves down to the forest floor and it finds the underside of a leaf. And then the fungus tells it to get its mandibles out and attach underneath the leaf. And slowly the ant's body will degenerate as the fungus takes over. So it'll start spreading its spores throughout the ant and keep reproducing. And then the ant ends up dying and the fungus just ends up living its best life underneath the leaf on the forest floor. Happy days.
Like alien bursting out of.
Pretty much, yeah. And controls the ant's mind somehow.
Well, this is what The Last of Us is based on, the cordyceps fungus, which is the same.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The same kind of thing. That's the science it's based on, basically.
So cool.
Have you watched? Anybody seen The Last of Us?
Yeah.
No, but I'm going to need to.
I watched it in research for this show. Honestly, I played both games.
I heard something that a researcher was talking about where, as it is, the cordyceps fungus has no way of infecting the human body. So the whole concept of The Last of Us at this point in time is, it's not a reality, not something that can happen.
But there's a potential 2.5 million more species we are yet to discover.
Well, indeed.
I don't think I got that math
And
right, but
potentially with climate change, as fungi evolve to
tolerate warmer temperatures.
it could exceed the conditions that our core temperature produce, which could leave us susceptible to potentially being infected by something like the cordyceps.
I don't want to be found dead underneath a leaf. Fungus taking over my body.
Okay, fact 1 from me. I'm going to give you a choice. I want you to answer creamy mushroom or portobello mushroom,
Portobello.
white mushroom or brown mushroom,
White mushroom.
chestnut mushroom or Swiss brown mushroom.
Swiss brown.
Well, they're all the same mushroom.
Get out.
They are.
All of the ones you just said.
All the ones I just said are the same mushroom. It's Agaricus bisporus, the common mushroom, also known as the table mushroom, the champion mushroom, and all of those mushrooms we've just listed and many more. So basically the difference in them...
all 6 options were the same, or the 3 that we
No,
picked?
all of them were the same. So basically it's just to do with when they're picked. So the button
And
mushroom...
marketing and probably how much you pay per kilo.
For sure. So the little button mushroom before the gills were exposed, they're all
Champignon?
champignon even smaller, and portobello is the wide open big fully grown,
There you
and
go.
everything else is a level on that. So they're all the same mushroom.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, so they're grown in 70 countries in the world. They make up at least 40%, possibly more, of the total mushrooms consumed by humans.
So when you're at the supermarket and you see the big portobello ones, that's the same as the
Button ones.
bottom ones.
And the same as the brown and the Swiss brown or the chestnut, if you depending where you shop for your mushrooms.
It's purely just different developmental stages of the the single
It's
species.
like eating veal or the mama cow. Same thing.
Really interesting. It's like next time I go to the supermarket, I'll be like,
That's a fun fact.
One big family, just all sat there. Only 20 calories per 100 grams. So yeah, a good food to eat. But there are concerns that there's not enough diversity because we are basically cloning these and farming these, that if they were to catch a disease, it could wipe out a major food source for humans and spread really quickly because they don't have the genetic diversity that they would normally have because we're just basically mass producing them.
Sounds like yet another human-made problem.
Good old humans. We're amazing. Okay, so that is the end of round 1. So we'll move on to fact 2 and we'll start with Brie.
Fungi are heterotrophs. So a heterotroph is an organism that can't produce its own food. Mushrooms can't photosynthesize. They acquire their food from absorbing dissolved molecules. Therefore, mushrooms are more aligned with animals than they are with plants, which is crazy to think because when you chop them up for your stir fry, you think, okay, it's one of our serves of vegetables. You classify it as a vegetable. Well, I do anyway. So to think it's not a plant, it's more aligned with an animal, that's crazy. But more than this, they actually breathe oxygen and release CO2. Opposite to
Fact
plants.
Yeah. Do you know what? I enjoy the long.
waited.
I did.
enjoy the long fact off. In last episode, I let Nick explain the majority of it, and then just come at the end and went sprinkled a little bit of magic.
Well, you were
on
adding
there.
a few more interesting points than I had for mine, actually.
had
So
to
I was like,
listen.
I'm actually learning
okay.
more. The only other stuff I had was that, the cells inside the fungus contain chitin, which is the exoskeleton, or an element found in the exoskeleton of insects and like your shellfish.
Yep. Yeah, I read that too.
Interesting. Okay, well, we have our first fact off.
Okay.
Sophie.
Just quickly, if mushrooms are more closely related to animals than plants, is that why they taste like meat?
Well, I read that too, that sort of meaty, the almost umami flavour, the meatiness of a good mushroom is attributed to being closely related to, more closely related to animals and plants.
And that makes sense in a way because it's eating organic matter
That's right.
to grow,
Yeah.
where a plant isn't.
And respiring rather than photosynthesizing.
Exactly, yes.
Meaty mushrooms. So, first person to answer, if they answer correctly, wins. If you don't answer correctly, the other person gets to give an answer. If it's a numbers question, you both get to deliver an answer and it's closest wins.
Okay. Good luck.
Okay. Question 1. What vitamin do mushrooms produce when exposed to ultraviolet light?
Vitamin D.
Vitamin D.
Oh.
Okay. Fungi are genetically closer to humans or plants.
Humans.
I'm going to let you call that one, Nick.
I think I heard Brie first, just by a split second.
There we go.
Yep.
What is a fruiting body in relation to fungus?
It is the reproductive, it's how they reproduce. So a fungi might be like a spiderweb network underground, and when it comes time to reproduce, it develops the fruiting body to
like the
release the
child?
spores.
You are right. I would have accepted the mushroom, but
Oh, yeah, well, mushroom or toadstool.
how many species of mushroom are considered edible?
1,000.
238.
238 and
1,000.
2,189.
Wow.
And mostly we eat portobello.
Or
Which is
Which is the same
basically all
mushroom.
of them in the supermarket.
Okay, and the last question. Name the mushroom that is one of the deadliest organisms on Earth.
Ophicodyceps unilateralis.
To humans.
Oh,
It's got a common name.
magic mushrooms.
Candida.
Nick?
Skull on a
The
hat.
death cap mushroom.
The death cap
Oh,
mushroom.
I would never have got that. What is
Never
that?
heard of it. What is it?
Oh, it's just a poisonous mushroom. And we must point out during this episode, and we will say at the end, that going out into the wild and picking your own mushrooms is not advised.
But technically, every mushroom is edible. Some you only eat once.
Oh, God.
That's staying in.
Were you waiting to? Yeah.
So fact 2 for Nick is?
Fungi play an incredibly important role in our ecological systems around the world. So without mushrooms, life on Earth as we know it would essentially cease to exist. So higher fungi, mushrooms, toadstools, that sort of thing, the silent and essential partners in our woodland forest, particularly in Australia. Much of our native flora in Australia depend on fungi as a source of nutrients. So many fungi have a symbiotic relationship with the roots of our eucalypts. And if you think about that process of decaying matter in our ecosystems, without mushrooms, anytime a tree falls over or a branch falls or, leaf litter fills the ground layer, without mushrooms, this stuff would just continually pile up and up and up and up and up.
We'd be in a cesspit of decaying matter.
And you think about all the nutrients that's locked up in that.
Yeah.
Mushrooms are that critical link that provide nutrients from a resource that's otherwise unavailable to other plants. And they're able to break it down and provide nutrients to the other plants around them.
I wonder if there's studies on this. Maybe like fungus in Australia as well, if it's sitting in the leaf litter, does it have implications for natural occurring bushfire? Like, does it increase flammability to create more bushfire to then create more reproduction? Do you reckon that's a thing?
That's an interesting point.
They need more bushfire to continue the fertility of the forest so the fungus isn't present?
Potentially,
I don't know. Maybe there's studies on it.
Just to continue on from this little fun fact, so many of our native animals in Australia depend on fungus. So we have fungus-eating reptiles, mammals, and obviously a lot of insects rely on fungus as a food source. One animal in particular, the long-nosed potteroo, actually seeks out fungus as a food source. And I believe bandicoots will feed on fungus as well.
Okay, so fact 2 for me is we may all soon be living in a mushroom house. So the vegetative part of a fungi living underground is a thing called mycelium that is made up of thin fibers called hyphae. The construction industry has started to play about with this as a building material. We use it in packaging at the moment for biodegradable packaging. We use it to make bricks and we use it for insulation as well. So basically the process takes about 5 days. They throw some fungus and some food like wood, decaying matter into a mold, not a mold, a brick mold. And after 5 days, they compress and remove all of the moisture or the liquid from this, and this gives you a solid brick.
Wow.
Now, this brick is fire resistant. It's carbon neutral, and it's a way that could revolutionize the building industry as we know it. Now, comparatively to a concrete brick, they're nowhere near as strong. So a concrete brick can take 4,000 psi, whereas a mycelium brick can only take 30 psi at the moment, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that's still a lot.
If
That's
the
still
big bad
strong.
wolf comes and huffs and puffs,
And blows.
we're all up the creek.
And I want some for my pizza. So bricks are 133 times stronger, but the mycelium brick is still in its early stages. At the moment, they've managed to build a 2-story structure with the bricks and it'd be able to support weight and stuff like that. So it's pretty interesting. If you go online, you can see some of the buildings, and they've grown chairs out of mycelium and stuff like that, made furniture. It's really interesting and really good for the environment. If they manage to get that strength up a tiny little bit more, it will change the industry.
I've seen mycelium used for the production of green leather, that you can grow it and dye it in any pattern shape. So if you want a massive couch, you don't need to skin 6 cows. You can just have one mycelium. Shoes, handbags, all of that. So it's an emerging industry. The fashion industry is quite amazing. But in regards to bricks, when you said it's carbon neutral, does that take into account the off-gassing? Because presumably is it still living? It can't be living because once they remove the water, so it's no longer off-gassing CO2 because as we know it breathes oxygen and okay.
But it is biodegradable. So it will break down eventually.
Did you say how long?
No, I didn't research that far, but it will break down given certain conditions.
Yep.
But even if they didn't use it for houses, you could use it for furniture, insulation.
Yeah. Like I say, packaging is a big thing at the moment. There's a couple of companies that really make it in packaging. I think I've actually received something in mushroom packaging before I read it, and I was like, oh, that sounds cool.
It's great. It's really exciting where we're going with that.
Cool. Okay, so that is the end of round 2. Let's move swiftly on to round 3, and fact 3 from Bree is...
So fact 3, I've titled location. So initial studies of the trillions of microorganisms in our bodies has always focused on bacteria primarily. It's only semi-recently that we've started to look at, okay, well, there's actually beneficial fungal species in our body. So the human body is host to an estimated, it's a pretty sharp number for an estimate, 101 fungal species in our bodies.
Like naturally occurring.
Yeah, I didn't see what the sample size was in the study, sorry. But the most common fungus is the Candida genus. Mm-hmm. When you get an overgrowth of Candida that leads to thrush in the human body. Now, for anyone squeamish, tune out. The majority of the fungal species were found in our mouths. That's I think I need to brush. So super gross but super important because they play a really they create the delicate balance of microbiome in our body. So don't brush your teeth too much.
So when people are saying, oh, my gut biome is off, it's essentially the fungi in the body is...
It's primarily a microbiome is made up of the bacteria, but there's mycobiome, which they're starting to look at, which is the fungal aspect of the microorganisms that play a big part in our gut. But the gut is primarily the bacteria, the balance of bacteria, but there are species, 101 estimated, to play a role in that as well, which we've underestimated thus far, but they're now starting to look at the role that plays. So, yeah, it just grossed me out when they said it's in your mouth.
Okay, that's cool. Okay, Nick.
Gross is what it is.
So there is a group of mushrooms out there that smell like death.
Is this the one in Malaysia? Or is that a flower?
That's a flower, the Rafflesia.
Yeah.
So in Australia, we have a mushroom called the stinkhorn mushroom. It's a group, of
that
mushrooms.
Does stink, yeah.
The phallus.
Yeah.
Yes.
The phallus genus.
Yeah. So there's a few different ones out there, some that look like these little red tentacles emerging from the earth. And in particular, the veiled lady mushroom or the veiled lady stinkhorn. Phallus induciatus. So the smell is meant to resemble the smell of rotting flesh or rubbish to attract insect pollinators. So the insects will come to the mushroom or the fruiting body and collect the spores and send those spores out there to further populate the mushroom. So this form of dispersal is known as mycophagy. So myces comes from Latin, meaning mushroom or fungus. Phagean, the root of phagus, meaning to eat or consume. So with the veiled lady stinkhorn, it starts as this little button of a brown mound, and then from this, the fruiting body emerges, which is this long phallic-like structure that comes out of the mushroom.
Looking.
Well, the head of it's all sticky, and that's where the spores are. And then as the fruiting body matures, this beautiful laced veil comes out from the head of the mushroom. And
they are really pretty.
They are like a ballerina skirt, like a tutu or something.
Yeah. Yeah, so they're typically seen after heavy rainfall during humid conditions.
And they reek.
They do. They are stinky.
They really do, yeah.
I've never smelt one. I've read about the smell, but I've
Do
never
yourself a favour.
Yeah.
get out there and
Grab it
sniff
next time you see one.
Yeah,
Lick it.
Get a stink horn and snort it.
Get a stick on into you.
Fact free for Sophie.
So my third fact, obviously we're all aware that fungus can have health implications for humans, but it also can have significant health implications for animals, especially in birds. So there's something called avian aspergillosis, which birds can pick up from a moist environment. They basically breathe it in, and it has had really big impacts on the species of bird called kakapo, which happens to be my favourite bird. And they're found in New Zealand, well, they're native to New Zealand, and they're the world's heaviest and rarest parrot, which is also flightless and also the cutest animal ever. They were shifted to an offshore island in New Zealand called Codfish Island. They were taken off the mainland because there was so many introduced mammal predators there, because the animal's so cute and bouncy and clown-like. It's that bird that you would have seen basically making out with Stephen Fry's
Yes, I was going to say, don't they try to procreate with rocks and stuff?
Yeah. Very charismatic, funny animals. So a lot of money goes into their conservation. And their population at its peak was at about 211, and I believe they'd pulled that up from, I'm not really sure, but say around 100. So they were very close to extinction. And one year, which was in 2019, they started noticing that a couple of breeding females were dying. I think 2 died. So researchers went down there and found out that they were contracting this avian aspergillosis, which is the fungus, basically. So a massive effort went into basically trying to save all these animals for whatever reason. I'm not really sure why. This fungus was just naturally occurring more so than usual. And out of, I believe, 211 individuals, 21 they had to take back to Auckland Zoo that had contracted this fungus, which is 10% of the population, and most of them were breeding females. So you can imagine if they lost all of them, massive hit to the population. So they took them all back. Most of them went to Auckland Zoo, and to basically treat this fungus, they put the birds in a nebulizer. So when they get this fungus, if it's a heavy burden, which it was in this case, it impacts their respiratory system and can be fatal if untreated. So what they have to do is they actually went and helped. So you orally medicate the animal. It gets lots of x-rays, and on the x-ray you can see the fungus spreading throughout the lungs, basically. Because they have such a specific diet, there's millions of dollars that goes into this effort to make sure they're getting fed the right food. And then they're nebulized every day. So they put into basically like a crate, like a dog or cat crate, and you cover it in a sheet and you put in these little tubes, and it's connected to a machine which you put in medication, and then it's kind of like gassing or like creating a steam for this bird to inhale. So you do that every day, and it goes on for months for most of them, and millions of dollars go into this effort. And in 2019, they had 21 infected. They lost 9, but they managed to save all of the others. So it was a huge hit to the population, but because of the amazing conservation effort, especially by Auckland Zoo, they managed to salvage the population, and now people basically go down to the island every year to monitor the breeding
Shout out to Auckland Zoo. That's amazing.
Very cool.
And all the ones that were cured, totally cured?
Yeah. Yep. So they don't, it's so cool. They put them on Air New Zealand flights so you can watch it all, and they're in their little cages in Air New Zealand, and they're such placid birds. So when you get them, you kind of just sit them on your lap and you can take fluids, and they're kind of just the most amazing creatures because they're so placid and
well, they've never really
so
had a predator,
dopey.
have they?
No, never had a predator. And you can you changed out their sheets every day and put in the new plants, and they run around like little clowns, and because they can't fly and they're sort of used to just stumbling around on the ground, they're just rolling they're just so silly. It's so funny. And then they get treated for a few months, and then they keep getting continual x-rays to watch how the fungus is spreading, and when it's all clear, they then get back on their flight and go down to Codfish Island again. Okay,
fact free for me. I'm a fungi and I can laugh at myself. Yes, the laughing gym mushroom has the ability to produce a sound that sounds like a human laughing when it's sporing. So,
Can you play the audio now?
I watched it for 20 minutes last night. 20 minutes of my research last night was laughing at YouTube videos. So you can't hear it with the human ear. You've got to use a microphone.
Oh.
So basically, the way that most mushrooms spore is each little spore is in a chamber, and there's a tiny bit of water hung above it. And basically, as the water evaporates, surface tension builds and all the spores are ejected out. And the spores are ejected out from a mushroom at, I think it's Mach 25, which is super fast. Mach 9 is what a shotgun fires out. So spores come out of a mushroom super quickly. So that's how they shoot the spores out. Now, scientists believe for a long time that the reproduction stage then went passive. So it was nothing to do with the mushrooms, and it was all to do with the wind. Carrying the spores off. But they found now that basically some mushrooms, the laughing gin mushroom and about 8 or 9 other species that they've identified, actually uses another layer of water above where the spores came out, and they use, it's evaporative cooling to create airflow that spreads the spores that little bit further, gives them that little bit more of a chance.
Extra little push.
And that the sound of that air, the expelled air coming out over the gills makes it sound like laughing on the laughing gin mushroom.
Yeah, you know what I'm going to ask.
How did they discover this? Yeah, demonstration first.
YouTube it, seriously.
No, I want your interpretation.
Oh, I don't. It's like a high pitched giggle. It's like it's like a ripple.
Okay.
It's like the gills ripple. They've got close up macro shots of it with the gills kind of ripple.
Like, do you think they just went up to every mushroom with a microphone, just waiting until? Like, how do they discover these things?
Well, in the lab, no doubt.
True. Well, yeah. I'm picturing a guy in the forest.
Who instinctively puts a microphone against a mushroom? I think that we're going to find something.
Yet again, how did they find the airflow? Do you know what I mean? For years, for most of science, we've believed that it's just the wind that took it, but no, mushrooms produce their own airflow after they've ejected the spores, and the spores come out it's so fast. It's like there's lots of slow motion photography of them sporing on YouTube as well, which people should check out because it's really fascinating. Okay, and that is the end of round 3. Let's move on to round 4. And as always, we'll start with Brie.
So my fact 4 is that it can be your garden's best defense. And you touched on this earlier, and I was borderline fact off, but I think they vary enough. So fungi is very, very beneficial in the garden environment if you're growing your own vegetables and so forth. So mycorrhizal fungal, it's any type of fungus species that has a symbiotic relationship with the root system of a plant. So it creates, this mycorrhizal fungal creates like a spider web network underground, and what it does is it actually connects to the end of the plant's root system. So the symbiosis happens when the plant, similar to your fact previously, the plant feeds the fungus through photosynthesis, gives it carbohydrates and sugars, feeds the fungus. The fungus then extends the reach, so to speak, of the plant's root system, so it makes available more water, so it can increase drought resistance. It allows the plants to reach more nutrients, micronutrients in the soil that otherwise it was unable to access. And it also connects the plants together. So multiple plants can be connected to the mycorrhizal fungal, creating almost like an internet, and it's dubbed the Wood Wide Web.
Love that.
So this is a really crazy fact that, say you've got a plant and it's being attacked by aphids. It can release the chemical compound and send a signal through this fungal internet to the surrounding plants of that species saying, hey, I've got some aphids. The other surrounding plants can then create their own compounds that repel the aphids or attract beneficial predators. So perhaps a wasp species that eats the aphids. So if you've got an infestation in your veggie garden on one plant, it doesn't, if you've got a great soil microbiome with mycorrhizal fungal in it, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to lose your whole garden.
So you're really doing yourself a disservice if you're not using mushroom mulch.
from everything I've read in all aspects of fungi, it seems to just be such a beneficial thing in our world. And like you said, we couldn't survive without it, but it just seems to get more and more and more amazing the more you read about it and learn. So
Very cool.
yeah.
Okay, Nick, fact 4 for you.
This was almost a fact off with Brie with the Candida fungus in our bodies. But I've sort of taken this in a bit of a different direction. So I'm not quite sure the mechanism behind it, but people with a high intake of mushrooms in their diet, apparently there's a relationship with this Candida fungus that increases the rates of fungal infections from Candida. So when it's in balance, it's a neutral component, symbiotic fungus within our bodies. But when it becomes out of balance, that's where we get it causes thrush. Yeah, you can end up with throat infections, vaginal infections, when this Candida becomes out
Takes
of balance.
over.
Yeah, so apparently whatever the mechanism behind eating a lot of mushrooms is linked to this increased imbalance of Candida in the body.
Hey.
So eat mushrooms, but not too many.
Apparently, yeah.
Okay.
Beautiful. Okay, fact 4 for second.
I love that you described that fact as beautiful.
Beautiful.
Not my choice of words.
Lovely. God, it's uncomfortable though.
Is it?
It's not nice. Yeah. So Sydney scientists have discovered 2 types of fungi that can break down the stubborn plastic called polypropylene. So it's got the highest rate of decomposition. And it's thought that it could have a really big impact on our recycling crisis in Australia, because we do end up with 13,500 tonnes of polypropylene in landfill every year, which is gastronomical. They're thinking that they can start putting this fungus in landfill and it's going to start breaking down, hopefully, our stubborn plastics.
That would be amazing.
Would be.
Okay, fact 4 from me is that a holiday led to one of the biggest medical discoveries of modern medicine. So in 1928, Alexander Fleming went away on holiday, and when he returned, he found a Petri dish that he'd forgot to clean that had a bacteria in them. And on that bacteria was a mold, Penicillium notorium, and there was a ring around the mold between the bacteria, and further studies showed that the mold was eating the bacteria, which led to the formation of the first antibiotic, which is penicillin, which has saved millions, if not billions, of lives around the world since. In 1945, along with Howard Florey and Ernest Chain, he was given the Nobel Peace Prize.
Was this an everyday guy or a scientist?
He was a scientist.
Oh, okay.
He was studying
I
bacteria.
don't keep agar plates in my house.
Yeah, so he got the Nobel Prize in 1945 along with 2 other guys that figured out how to mass produce penicillin. And one can only imagine that the use of penicillin around that time, 1945, the end of World War II, during the war, it must have been a most sought after
The number of
material.
lives that have been saved from the administration of penicillin is incredible when you think about, just some simple diseases or things that we face now, that it's like, oh, we'll just, have some antibiotics that otherwise, 1,000 years ago, you're done.
You're dead.
Yeah.
Okay, we are on to the final fact, fact 5. So, Brie, let's start with you.
Okay, this is my favourite fact and it just blows my mind, and I hope, well, you might have heard, I hope you don't have it, but it's been doing the rounds on social media, reels and so on. So some fungus has displayed primitive intelligence. So you think about fungus, it is brainless, there's no spinal cord, there's no cerebellum, there's no prefrontal cortex, all this sort of stuff we learnt about last time. So across numerous studies, scientists found that, so there's a yellow slime mould called Physarum polycephalum. So this particular species that they've studied displays remarkable abilities to solve problems. So there's two studies in particular that I want to talk about. So one is around 2009, 2010, a Japanese scientist, Toshiyuki Nakagaki, he got protein. Read Uncle Toby's Oats. It's a delicacy in the fungus world. And he lay these pieces of protein on an agar plate in the formation of Tokyo and the surrounding larger cities. He inoculated the central Tokyo hub and just let it grow. What they found is within an hour it starts to spread, and then within 6 hours it had reached all the protein spots and then started to reshape its cellular structure to create feeding tubes from point to point back to the Tokyo hub.
Yeah.
By the end of the experiment, roughly 24, 48 hours, it had totally realigned itself. Some linkages were dissolved, broken because it was found to be inefficient by the fungus, and other ones were strengthened to create main feeding tubes. And within that 24, 48-hour period, in the scientific report, it showed remarkable or significant overlap with the existing Japanese or the Tokyo subway network. So the subway network that had taken countless hours by expert engineers and mathematicians that, used math to calculate the most efficient way to transport people across Tokyo and the surrounding hubs. This fungus, this slime mold, had figured out within a day or two, and it was almost identical to the existing network. And to just think what we could apply that primitive intelligence to.
We need that for Gold Coast public transport.
Okay, let's go. Fact 5 for Nick.
So a lot of this conversation so far, we've talked about the benefits of fungus and the mutualistic relationships in many cases. In Australia, we have a case that's not so positive. So we have a killer fungus in Australia that's been introduced from Latin America that is known as myrtle rust. So basically it's a fungus that impacts the Myrtaceous family of plants in Australia. So this is all of our paper barks, our gum trees, things like our lily pillies. So it's quite a broad group of plants that are being infected by this fungus. So the key indication of an infection is these little yellow-orange pustules or markings on the leaves of the infected plant. And essentially this fungus impacts everything from the seed, the fruit, the leaves, the stems, and it really just makes it difficult for the plants to produce nutrients, reproduce, and it's just getting through our natural ecosystems everywhere in Australia, and scientists really aren't sure what to do about it because it's so difficult to control or to when millions and millions of spores are being released and spreading through wind, water, insect pollinators. It's a really difficult thing to control. And in some cases it's caused the near complete loss of some of our species.
And fungus, as we are realising, are great at adapting and spreading.
Okay, fact 5 for Sophie.
My final fact, another health-related one for humans this time. So obviously people get fungal infections under their nails or in their nail bed quite regularly. Yeah, kind of gross. But when you see it on your fingers or your toes and like the nail bed kind of lifts up and goes a bit yellowy. So if you then happen to suck your thumb a lot and your thumb was infected, or your toenail, if you can reach that way, or
if you are that way
inclined, it can have really detrimental effects on your respiratory system. With some cases, even people having found that they've started to develop asthma over time because it is attacking the respiratory system. And there's really not too much they can do to prevent it other than just basically telling people not to put your fingers in your mouth, which sounds like common sense, but you
Or
probably
suck your
do
partner's
it.
toe.
Ugh. You probably do it more than you realise. Although if you have an infected finger, hopefully you're not doing it. But if you do have an infected fungus nail, keep your hands out of your mouth.
Chop your finger off.
Are we talking tinea?
I don't know the specifics on it. I
So-
did look up the name. Something Aspergillosis fumata.
Okay, right.
So
Yeah,
tinea
I
is an athlete's foot.
Yeah, which is a fungal infection of the foot nails or something along those lines.
Yeah, so it attacks your white blood cells and can also cause asthmatic symptoms.
Ew.
Okay, so fact 5 from me. I saved the biggest till last. So the largest living organism on the world is a honey fungus nicknamed the humongous fungus. And when said with a northern British accent, it sounds great. Humongous fungus. Okay, so it's located in the US, in Oregon. It's thought to be between 2,500 and 8,500 years old. And the largest animal ever to live is
The blue
Whale.
whale.
Wow.
the blue whale. Okay, and blue whales grow up to 30 meters, can weigh up to 200 tons. That's as heavy as 3,333 humans. The space that this humongous fungus occupies is 9,650,000 square meters, meaning you could roughly fit around 110,000 blue whales into that area. That's how
that's
big
cool.
it is.
That's a big.
I feel like that's the whole size of Oregon.
It's huge.
So when you say it's the largest living organism, I guess to try and give some more context here, we're not talking about like a single fruiting body of this thing. Given the way mushrooms grow and
The mushrooms are quite small that come up, but it's just the genetic test. So it's the mycelium network underground, basically, that covers up this huge space, and the mushrooms just, the genetic test that they've done on the whole area, on all the mycelium.
All the little shroomies that
bring
pop up are the
It's
same.
all the same. It's
They're all
all
related.
the same organism.
that's amazing.
How cool.
The history that thing must have, that hold in its network and stuff like that, if there is some kind of sentience.
Communication threads over the years between the trees of they've told each other.
So, yeah, pretty amazing. Okay, well, that concludes all our facts. So let's try to figure out the fibs. So let's go with Bree first. Let's have a quick recap.
Okay, so the first fact was, what is it? So it was my summation of how it all fits in taxonomy. Fungi are heterotrophs, location, about fungus being in the mouth. Your garden's best defense, focusing on mycorrhizal fungus, and that some fungus has primitive intelligence.
Now, this is a problem for me because I believe all of them.
Yeah, so do I.
I'm going to go with the fungus in the body. I reckon there'll be more than 101.
I actually thought the Japanese train system was designed from this experiment with the fungus, not the other way around where
Physarum polycephalum, you mean?
Yeah, that one. I thought engineers used this fungus experiment as a model to design the train networks in Japan. So you explained it, that it miraculously followed the networks that the engineers came up with their maths and science. So I think I'm going to say that was the lie.
I'm also with Nick because I have read about the subway system in Japan, and I do think that they modelled it off.
Okay.
But your way was very believable. All your facts are believable.
I'm just a believable gal, a fun gal. Okay, so the lie, location. You were actually right. But the feet, in fact, harbour the most diverse collection of fungal species. Up to 80 genera or genus of fungal species can be found in the feet, including the yeast Saccharomyces, which is what we use to brew beer and make bread.
Oh.
So stop licking feet.
Okay, Nick, give us a rundown.
So my facts were the ant-loving fungus, where I spoke about the interaction between ants and fungus and farming the fungal spores for food and the mutualistic relationship. The essential role of fungi in terms of their breakdown and making nutrients available to other living organisms in ecological systems. The stinkhorn fungus, the stinky fungus that smells like death and attracts insect spore dispersers. The relationship between eating mushrooms and the increased risk of imbalance of the candida fungus in the human body, and the killer fungus myrtle rust and its impact on native Australian flora.
They're all, again, very believable. They sound very legit.
And the problem we have with Nick is this is an area that he actually works in and studies in. So he sounds it's like, how can you pull the science apart when you just like, he sounds like he knows what he's talking about.
I think if there was any possibility of a lie, maybe the one where if you eat too many mushrooms, it can cause an overgrowth of candida in your body.
I think that one, or even the rust myrtle, because I haven't read anything on either of them, but I'm with Sophie. It's like the human body. I didn't read anything that kind of said, hey, you can get mushroom overload, basically.
I agree. I'm not going to quiz you on the myrtle rust because that is your area of expertise, but I read specifically the opposite, that it is a fallacy that if you eat too many mushrooms, you get just a gutload of thrush all over. That,
You're all correct. I was just reading up on like common misconceptions on mushrooms.
We probably read the same website.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so Sophie, give us a rundown.
My facts were the zombie ant fungus, how the fungus is more closely related to an animal rather than a plant. It can cause health concerns in animals, especially birds, the aspergillosis. And the Sydney scientists with the fungus that can break down stubborn plastics. And my last fact was the nail infections and not putting it inside your mouth because it can cause big health implications.
Well, I'm going to go with your fact about the zombie fungus, only because I was going to have it as one of my researches, and there's a couple of things I think stood out. The fungus doesn't control the brain at all. The fungus grows through the body and puppeteers the body, but doesn't control the brain of the ant. And also it tells it to go up high, not low, and grab onto a leaf. It doesn't tell it to go down. It tells it to go about 25 centimeters in the air where the humidity is right, and to bite onto a leaf in the air, not on the ground. So I think that's a lie, unless we're both reading different research, which could be probably true.
I agree. That was the thing that got me when you said it goes down. I read that they go up so that the spores can fall and create a larger landing pad.
I think the nails and the asthma relationship there, I think that one might be a lie.
Okay. You are correct, Nick.
Hey.
Totally made that up.
We read different websites then.
Yeah, and I guess my research was wrong. They go because you guys both had they go up.
Who knows? I mean, from what I see, I believe it goes up. But
I still think it's worth mentioning. Don't suck your infected nails, though.
Oh God, no! Of course,
that's disgusting. But you won't get asthma.
All those mushrooms: button mushroom, portobello, white, Swiss, brown, chestnut, table, champion. They're all the same mushroom, the Agaricus bisporus species. Soon we may be living in mushroom houses. That's the use of mycelium to produce building materials. The laughing Jim fungus that can make a sound like a human when it's releasing spores. Penicillin was discovered by accident from return of a holiday, and that the largest living organism on Earth ever that we know of is the humongous fungus in Oregon.
I think the different species of mushroom, I think surely not. They can't all be the same, given the plethora of species we have. But also the laughing Jim, I feel like perhaps there is a species called laughing Jim, but it's more attributed, that name's more attributed to perhaps psilocybin and the effects it might have if consumed. I will say the number one, all the species being the same mushroom.
I'm a little bit on the fence. I didn't see anything about the laughing Jim mushroom, but I also didn't really, not that I looked into it specifically, but the building materials from mushrooms, I know there's vegan leather from mushrooms. I'm just not sure if we're quite at a point where there's been a building material in the context of our traditional building methodologies that's been developed. I'm going to say that's the lie. But yes, definitely on the fence, this laughing Jim.
Sounds shady.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
they all sound shady. That's what mushrooms like.
But just on the laughing Jim, mushrooms, fungi aren't like plants that produce flowers and like an attractant for pollinators. You know, plants can attract birds, insects, a whole plethora of animals to help with reproduction. Mushrooms don't have that same ability necessarily. As I mentioned with the stinkhorn fungus, they can produce scents to attract pollinators. But otherwise, they're largely dependent on wind and water for dispersal of their spores. So potentially there may be some there may be some evolutionary mechanism to help with that spore dispersal in the case of the laughing Jim. So I thought that might have been a bit more plausible.
Well, I really want to believe the laughing Jim because I want to go YouTube it after this.
You should.
I am with Brie. My initial thoughts were on that all the mushroom species basically in the supermarket are the same. Surely not. Surely they're different.
Well, let's just say if we all went to eat a laughing Jim, we'd all be hearing Jim laughing because it is a magic mushroom.
Yes.
Oh.
That I should have.
I really wanted that to be true.
I'd like to prefix this. It's also toxic, so nobody go out and eat a laughing Jim, please.
The idea of a guy in a lab with his microphone.
Just listening to it going, oh,
You
guys,
guys.
listen to this. Tell it a joke. Why did the chicken cross the road?
So I feel ripped by Woolies
So
and Coles.
there legit isn't a mushroom that laughs.
No.
How sad is that?
That's disappointing. I want my money back on this episode.
I want that to be a fact.
And also all mushrooms are the same in the supermarket.
All mushrooms are the same in the supermarket. Everything I said about the dispersal of the spores and the new science of the airflow is true.
Okay.
How they
All right.
push it out themselves a bit.
How they create airflow. They used to think it was wind, but they do. Some mushrooms do create their own airflow and stuff like that. But it's just it doesn't make a noise that sounds like human laughter.
That was a good line.
All that's left to say is thank you very much to our hosts, Brie, Nick, Sophie, and
Thank you.
I've been Kieran. I've been a fungi. You guys have been fungus, fungi, and fungi. Fungi?
Yeah, we'll go with that.
The fun G.
Fun gal.
Fungi, yeah. Okay, bye.
Original
Thank
gangster.
you.
Bye.
Bye.